my name is Temni Wright, and this is Lawyering Behind the Scenes. This is a season 1 special on the lawyering behind the pursuit of justice. So today we are going to talk about what lawyering goes behind the pursuit of justice. We'll go mostly into criminal cases, and we will use a high-profile murder as our case study. So we'll kind of use that as to make examples throughout this video. Okay, so let's get started. So first we're going to talk about the players. In a high-profile murder case, typically the family will hire their own attorney. It's either the family or you hear it called the estate. So the estate of the deceased, which is representation of his interests or her interests in death. So the estate would be something like whoever has control of that person's assets after their death, or whoever has been chosen to represent that person after their death. So they'll hire a family attorney, and that attorney is a civil attorney. So I think it's important to start off with the difference between civil and criminal. So a civil arena and a civil case is where there are monetary or action-related consequences or remedies to the case. In a criminal arena, of course, which is more people are familiar with the criminal arena, is where the consequence and the actions from the defendant being found guilty may be monetary, but that money typically goes to the government. Maybe it goes to a victim's rights group, or maybe it does go to the victim itself. But in most cases, the remedy for that is jail time, probation, and a lot of the things that we see in criminal cases. So the family of the decedent will hire an attorney to represent their civil rights when there is a murder or some kind of big case. And that civil attorney will help them go through the criminal process. They're not representing them in a criminal capacity. They're not involved really in the criminal case, but they do represent the family or the estate through the criminal process and help them understand what's going on, help them get publicity and be able to speak to the media about their case. Throughout the criminal trial, they are preparing for a civil litigation that will typically follow. So in the case of a murder, that would be a wrongful death case, or some other cause of action related to the crime that occurred. And their important role during the criminal proceeding is to really watch what kind of evidence is being collected, and what they can leverage and use in the civil case, and what they can honestly broadcast to the media to bring attention to the case. And that can have impacts on the jury pool. It can have a broad-ranging impact. We see now during this time that the civil rights attorneys that are involved in these murder cases for representing the families of African American men and women who have been killed will be their representative in terms of the media. They'll be a support system, and they will really get the word out there in a media capacity and on social media, so that you and me, everyday citizens, will know about this case, will be enraged, will write our senator, and we will become advocates on their behalf. So that's really the role of a civil rights attorney or other kind of civil attorney litigator during the criminal case. So then now the players who actually play a direct role in the criminal process. So first it will be the Attorney General. The Attorney General, there's, as you know, hopefully, there's an Attorney General that's head of the United States, and then there's an Attorney General that's head of a state. So in most cases where there's a high-profile trial or issue, the state attorney general will get involved, and sometimes they'll hire a special prosecutor to prosecute the case. Sometimes they'll be involved in moving that case to a different arena than where it occurred, so that the decision making and the litigation process could be non-prejudicial, because If it occurred in a certain area and there's heightened media attention around it, and people, the jury pool, most importantly, the jury pool has been able to hear all these things that have gone on in the press, and it's in their faces every day because they live in that locale, then they'll try to move the case to another location so that it's less likely that the jury pool will be prejudicial. And they'll also address that during jury selection and what they call voir dire, which is the questioning that they do for the jury pool to determine if they should be on the jury. So the U.S. Attorney General and the Attorney General of State, they are the head prosecutor of the United States or the head prosecutor of that state. So everything for the government trickles down from them. So all the cases, and then who we're going to talk about next, which is the district attorney and the state attorney, they, really get their marching orders from the Attorney General. So the district attorney and the state attorney, which is called in some jurisdictions, I think most commonly it's called the district attorney, but it's also called the state attorney in some locations. So they will be the head prosecutor of a certain area. So I live in California, so the district attorney is really by county. So there'll be a district attorney that represents the county, and they will oversee all the prosecutions and all the cases that take place in that county. And it is an elected or appointed office, depending on where you live and what the state rules are. So next, who reports to the district attorney or the state attorney is, of course, the prosecutor. So the prosecutor is the on-the-ground attorney who is prosecuting the case. We're going to the other side of the aisle, which is the defense attorney. First, the public defender. So public defenders are usually a government agency who it represents clients, defendants who cannot afford their own counsel. So you'll see, and you've probably seen this on TV, that when there is a defendant who cannot afford their own counsel, they will call the public defender, and the public defender will come represent them. And honestly, the representation can really vary because the public defenders are severely overworked because there's a lot of people who can't afford legal representation. Unfortunately, that is part of the inequality in our justice system, in that defendants often cannot afford legal representation, and public defenders are really overworked because they have a really high caseload, and it takes a lot to go into the defense of someone, and the prosecution typically, has more money, has more resources, and the public defender's office, unfortunately, does not. So there are other organizations, nonprofit organizations, that provide defense that is either on a lower scale, or they'll provide it free. So this is for people also who cannot afford representation. So then on the other side of that, there are private defense attorneys. Who defendants who can afford to hire their own attorneys will go that route and really have more resources in that case because it's a private attorney, and they can invest the time and resources in it that sometimes the public defender or a public defense agency, nonprofit, won't be able to. So next, we are going to go through the criminal court process. So this is just an overview of typically what it looks like. So it varies by jurisdiction. It varies by county, state. That's what I mean by saying it varies by jurisdiction. But this is just like a general overview so that you can kind of get a sense of what the criminal process looks like and how attorneys, their role in each step of that.
So there's the complaint, the arrest, the arraignment, a preliminary hearing, a pretrial conference, and motions.
So then next we go to trial. So trials can really range. They can be they can be a few days. They could be months. And there's just a lot to get in with the trial, so I'm not going to go in depth with that, but that's when the trial takes place. So then the trial is done. The jury will come back. You know, you've seen it on TV or other you've seen it. So where the jury comes back. Oh, so a good thing to point out too is, and a criminal process really ends when the appeal process is exhausted. There's no more appeals on either side for the defendant or the prosecution to bring forth. And during that appeal process, though, so basically after we get the verdict, and you know, if they're guilty after the sentencing, that's when the civil attorney will start to get involved and start to file their case. So now they have all the facts of the case that took place, and even if it's not guilty, they will proceed with a civil trial if they feel that they have standing. And if it's guilty, it gives them even more evidence and more leverage to when they go into the civil trial. And then post-trial, you know, basically the defendant will go to jail or prison if they were guilty. And that's really it. The civil trial will usually be, like we discussed, wrongful death, something like some type of. The last thing we're going to talk about is really what we can do as citizens in changing the law, because the criminal system has been around for a long time. You'll see that there are changes to laws through legislation by our elected representatives and through the election process. So if you want to get involved in how law, so that's why I'm wearing this shirt, make law, not war. If you want to get involved in that process, it's not just about voting. So voting for sure. And it's not just about the presidential election that you're voting in. Your local elections have a lot of different people that you're voting for, a lot of different viewpoints. There's always, when you get your voter packet, there's always opposition, and I think it's just like pros and cons, basically. So like the people who are against them and people who are for them, they'll write pretty detailed information, and you can do research on your own. Google is your friend. So make sure if that's what you choose to do. I'm more like, if you want to vote. If you're interested in contributing to the electoral process, that's your right, and make sure you do your research when you're doing it. And if you want to be involved in the laws that are created and made and go into effect, voting is a really good avenue. There's also, once your elected officials are voted in, you can attend public hearings, you can speak at your local government hearings, you can really have your voice in the process. And you can just go to, like, if you're doing local stuff, you can go to the county's website, you can go to your specific city's website, and they'll have a list of hearings. You can see what, depending on what you're interested in, you can find hearings related to that topic. And then you can write a letter or email your elected officials. I find that this is somewhat effective. Kind of depends on who your elected officials are, but usually they'll have like a button on their website where you can email them, or you can send them an email. They'll just send you, they have an email address listed, and you can send them an email. Sometimes I notice that they'll wait and you won't hear back for like a month. And it seems to be because they had a lot of emails on this topic. So then they just wait till they did something about it. Or they'll wait and send like a bulk response, like, thank you for sending your email about your concern about the current state of the criminal justice system. I have done this, and this, and this, and this to address it. So that's a way to have your voice heard. Whether or not it's super effective and how much they're reading it, I think it in some instances they are. Besides the racial injustice issues that are going on, we're still in the middle of the coronavirus and COVID-19, and unemployment is also a big issue where people are not getting their money owed to them via unemployment that they're paying through their paycheck when they had a job. And so they have reached out to their local representatives and have been able to get some accountability and answers on that. I'm not sure if everyone has, but you'll see in some articles that is one way people have gotten that addressed. And then the last thing you can do is volunteer. You can volunteer for organizations that honestly, I think bring a little bit more strength and power to your voice. So if you can find an organization that you want to align yourself with, you can volunteer to be on their board of directors. You can volunteer on a case-by-case basis, but this kind of gives you the collective body power, where it's not just you as an individual saying, hey, where you're not saying as an individual, hey, you elected official, I want this, where you have a collective voice consistently pushing and a little bit more leverage to bring about that change. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned a little bit more about the lawyering behind the scenes of the pursuit of justice. I hope that you will take action in your own way to get involved in your community. It doesn't need to really be in a political manner, but maybe find ways that you can volunteer, or sometimes there's programs where you can visit people who are incarcerated and kind of hear their point of view. Yeah, there's plenty of ways to get involved. If you have any questions, please let me know, or if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Lawyering Behind the Scenes.